I'm Sharon Bill. Welcome to my Music Theory Tuition series where I work with you step by step through the ABRSM Discovering Music Theory grades. I'll work through every single exercise and explain everything you need to know. You can access information about the books I have available to help you on my website. Go to sharonbill.com. For advert-free and longer lessons, you can become a patron at patreon.com/SharonBill. If you can give me a like, that would be super, and please do subscribe to my channel to stay updated. You can support this channel by buying me a coffee at buymeacoffee.com/SharonBill. Let's continue with the topic of cadences, and so we're moving on to page 48 and onwards. This is page 48 to 49 in the Discovering Music Theory workbook, and we're looking at cadences in minor keys. And actually we've already covered this, and so we just get now some practical application of what we've discussed already, because a perfect cadence is always chords 5-1, plagal is always chords 4-1, and imperfect is always something to 5, regardless of whether it's a major or a minor key. It's just that now in a minor key, because of the raised seventh forming part of chord 5, we now see that in the cadence of the perfect cadence and the imperfect cadence, because they feature chord 5, which will include that raised seventh as the middle part of the chord. But there's nothing new, the same principles apply. And we just have to be aware that that will give us a clue as to what key we're in as well. And so let's move on. We always have to find out what key we're in first, then we have to name the chords, and that will give us our cadence. And we are best just mapping everything out first. If you just get all of your kind of nuts and bolts down on the page, all the thinking's done for you. So here we're told we're in D major. We know that because we've got the key signature of 2 sharps. It could be B minor, but B minor would require a raised seventh, so the A would have to be sharpened. That's not there, and so that's how we can be sure it's D major. They've done that thinking for us here. So chords 1, 2, 4 and 5 are our options. And if, for example, they've not given us this key and we've got the wrong key, you'll soon find out because your chords won't fit, and you'll know that something's wrong, and then you can be sure that you've got the wrong key. So if D is the first step of the scale, E is the second, G is the fourth, A is the fifth. Then we build our triad, E, G, B, G, B, D, A, C, E. And if that's the first, third, fifth, that gives us the root note of chord 5, so we can double check there. So let's see what notes we've got here. We've got a G, a D, a G and a B. And so that's chord 4. And then D, D, F, A. That's chord 1. So we have chords 4-1, which we know is our plagal cadence. It's a full close, but it's more gentle than a perfect in musical effect. And so let's move on. We're in the key of B flat major. We know that because there's a key signature of B flats and E flats. We're not in G minor because G minor would require an F sharp as the raised seventh. And so let's just draw out our options. So chords 1, 2, 4 and 5. So we have a B flat. We don't need to worry about the flats. The key signature will do that. So B, C, D, E is the fourth. Of course it's E flat, but your key signature deals with that. F, B, D, F, C, E, G, E, G, B, F, A, C. So that's all the thinking done, really. Let's see what we've got here. Then we have an F, a C, an A and an F. That's chord 5. Here we have a B flat. There's an F, a B flat and a D. That's chord 1. Chord 5-1. That's our perfect cadence, sort of a ta-da, everything's finished, everyone's gone home. Let's turn over to page 49 and we continue. So if you feel like you've got the gist of this, do have a go on your own. It's much better to try it on your own. Do press pause and then pop back into the video to double check these answers. So let's work through these together now. So we're in the key of A major. It could be F sharp minor, of course, but F sharp minor would have a raised seventh of an E sharp. That's not there. And so that tells us we're in A major. So let's map out our chords. So we've got chords 1, 2, 4 and 5. They are what our options are going to be. A is the first degree of the scale, B, D is the fourth, E is the fifth. Then we write out our triads. And again, if you find that difficult going 1, 3, 5, you can just visualize the piano keyboard 1, 3, 5 and so on. And then let's see what we've got here. We've got a D, an A, an F. Of course it's F sharp, but your key signature does the work for you here. So that's chord 4. So it could go to 1 as a plagal cadence, or it could go to 5 as a perfect cadence. Let's see what happens. E, E, G, B. Of course it's G sharp, but we don't need to worry about that. Your key signature will do that. There's chord 5. So anything to 5 is an imperfect cadence. It doesn't sound finished, it just leaves you hanging. Let's look at this next one. So we're in D minor, and we know that because we've got the key signature of B flat. That could mean F major, but here's our big clue. The C sharp is the raised sevenths, which always forms part of chord 5. That's your leading note. There's our raised seventh, telling us we're in a minor key, and so that's how we know that we're in D minor. So chords 1, 2, 4 and 5. If D is the first degree of the scale, then we have E, G and A, and then we build our triads, D, F, A, E, G, B. Of course it's B flat, but your key signature will deal with that. G, B, D again, the key signature will deal with that. However, always in the middle of chord 5, we have our leading note that is always raised in a minor key. And so before we even look at it, we know that's got to be chord 5, but let's just follow it through. We have a G, a B, of course it's B flat, G and E. So we have the notes of chord 2. Now they are rearranged. We don't have the E at the base, so it's not in root position, but nevertheless it's still the same notes. Chord 2 is our only option there. And then we have an A, E, C sharp. That C sharp tells us it's got to be chord 5. We knew that before we did any of this working out. And so 2 to 5, anything to 5 is an imperfect cadence because it leaves us hanging. It leaves us hanging because that 7th degree of the scale always pulls and wants to go home. 7 always has to rise to the tonic, and if it leaves us there, it's just going to leave us hanging and not sound finished. Let's move on. So here we're in C sharp minor. We could be in E major with this key signature, but we know that we're not because there's our big clue. There's our 7th, that's our leading note. And again, we already know this has got to be chord 5 because there's the leading note and it's part of chord 5. However, let's just get everything mapped out. Let's not cut corners. So chords 1, 2, 4 and 5. It's C sharp, but we can let the key signature deal with that. It's D sharp, but we can let the key signature deal with that. The only one we need to worry about is making sure we add the accidental. The key signature takes care of everything else bar the raised 7th. So we have C, E, G, D, F, A, F, A, C, G, B, D, but the middle of chord 5 is always the raised 7th. So let's see what we've got. We have a G, B sharp, G, D. Of course that's G sharp and D sharp as well. But there's our clue, the raised 7th. That's chord 5. And so the only possibility is for it to now become a perfect cadence. Let's see if that's true. We have a C, C, E, C. There is no G. Of course there are sharps, but that's enough to tell us we've got 2/3 of the chord. We've got enough there to tell us that's chord 1. It's a perfect cadence. Everything's finished. Now then, we get a little bit of a challenge. We're asked to write 4A, which was on the previous page here. This is D major, but we're now asked to write it in D minor. We're writing this cadence here in D minor, so we're going to have to change the key signature, and we're going to have to remember that in this, we've got to write this whole section. We've got to raise the leading note. So let's take this a little bit at a time. So let's just get everything, sort of all the nuts and bolts in place, and we can do the thinking afterwards. So we can do the key signature, which is now B flats because we're in D minor now. The time signature is 4/4. It's a good opportunity to practice writing 4-part harmony out because there's quite a lot to think about. Because if you notice, because we've gone into 4 individual voices, the rules for stems has changed. The stems go down where they should go up, but because it's showing us we've got like a soprano, alto, tenor and bass voice, you would say. The soprano always has the stems going up. The alto, the middle voice, here has the stems going down. The tenor, the third voice at the top of the bass, has the stems going up, stems going down, so we can see all the different voicings. And so you've got to get everything aligned so it shows that they form as a chord. We've got to everything aligned as well. So let's just write out, we have D, A, B, A as minims. So we have D, A, B. I'm going to worry about the stems later. Let's just get the note heads. And then we have F, E, F, G, F. So we have F, E, F is a minim. We're just copying the blobs at the moment. Nothing really to be thinking about. So now we move into the bass part, so let's copy this bass line, the tenor line in the bass clef. So this is the upper voice. We call this the tenor part, just out of interest. So we need an A. Now that's part of that chord, and then the D is part of this chord, so it must go underneath. It's really important that it goes there to show it's all part of this chord. We can't have it kind of off to the left or the right, as it were. And then we want the D, and then the same note D again in this final chord. And then in the bass line we have D, D, G, D. So let's copy those. D, D, G, again making sure it's aligned, and D forming a chord. So let's put our stems, we're not there yet. Stems up for the top voice, that's the soprano voice you would say, regardless of what instrument you're playing. Then the middle voice, this is the alto. And then we have this upper voice in the bass part, we call this the tenor part. We're not finished yet, we've still got work to do. I'm just getting the kind of all the blobs in place, as it were. Still no thinking just yet, we're just copying. So here we have a D, A, F, D. that's a chord 1 in D minor. And then here we have D, D, F, A, that's another chord 1. This isn't part of the chord, it's just a passing note, just filling in the gap in between. Well, it's actually just like an auxiliary note, really. It's just an extra non-harmony note, just dropping down and then going back. Now here we have an auxiliary note as well. Auxiliary, it's an auxiliary note, actually, because it's going back up. Here we have an auxiliary note, not part of the chord, just a little extra fill in, just a little wiggle that goes back. But because that's a C, that's the 7th degree of the scale, and so we have to raise that, we have to add a sharp, because D minor requires C sharp's raised 7th, which always pulls back home to note 1. But here it's not chord 1, we've got a G, G, B, D, B flat D, that's a chord 4 actually, but the 7th degree always rises to the home note, which is also part of chord 4, and then it finally ends on chord 1 there. So this is a peep ahead, looking at all of the notes and the harmonies, not just looking at the last 2 chords that we studied in exercise 1. We've actually sort of described all of these as well, just out of interest really, and we've explained these in between notes that aren't forming part of the chord, they're just little sort of twiddly extras as it were. And so that's the end of that little challenge. I hope this is helpful to your studies. Please do like and subscribe to stay updated. If you'd like to support this channel, you can buy me a coffee, and for advert-free lessons you can become a patron. Do visit my website where you'll find many resources available to help you. Visit sharonbill.com. Thanks for watching. Bye.